Are you looking to master the art of capitalizing on market pullbacks? Welcome to Morpheus Trading Group's latest update. I'm Deron Wagner, here with over 20 years of swing trading experience to help you navigate these dynamic market conditions. In this session, we're zeroing in on a key crypto market shift that could be a turning point for astute traders. Recently, Bitcoin and Ethereum both pulled back to test support of their 20-day exponential moving averages, a key short-term support level, for the first time in 2 weeks. This is a moment that savvy traders can't afford to ignore. At MTG, we've already been anticipating these movements, and the MTG tribe proactively sold all of our winning positions into strength several days ago to lock in gains. And now that a short-term correction may be underway, it's time to look ahead. This video is your guide to identifying potential lower risk pullback entry points in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some of the most explosive altcoins. We're talking about names like Solana, SOL, Avalanche, AVAX, and others that have scored massive breakouts. Be sure to stick around to the end of the video where we show you potential entry points on a pullback for some of these explosive altcoins. And these aren't just general trade ideas. These are strategic setups based upon our proven swing trading approach for more than 2 decades. As we dive into these promising altcoins, we want to hear from you. How do you plan your trades during such market pullbacks? Share your thoughts in the comments below. For the latest in market analysis and swing trading strategy for both crypto and stocks, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Now let's dive in. All right, let's start off with a look at Bitcoin, the king of crypto. This is a daily chart of Bitcoin, and you can see that for basically 2 months now, Bitcoin has been in a steady uptrend. It all changed on October 16th, which is when we had this big breakout here on big volume, where volume surged to several 100%, the average daily level, broke out above a range. And since then, now for 2 months, notice how the price has been trending steadily higher, forming higher highs and higher lows. And more importantly, notice how well Bitcoin has been holding support of both its 8 and 20 period exponential moving averages. The 8 period EMA is the green line and the 20 is the blue line. And then the red line is the 50-day moving average. And when you've got a strong uptrend, the price will often hold the 8 period EMA whenever we get a pullback or a correction. And on a pullback, if the 8 period doesn't hold, then the 20 period holds. So the stronger the uptrend, the more likely that the shorter term moving average is likely to act as support. So, for example, the 50-day moving average was in play a lot until 2 months ago. The price kept crossing over back and forth across the 50 because we weren't in a steady uptrend, right? And so that's an intermediate term indicator, and there was no steady trend. Notice how the moving averages were crossing back and forth, indicating a lack of a trend. But that's all changed over the past 2 months. Now we've got the moving averages stacked in the right direction, which means you've got the short period, the 8 above the 20, and then the 20 above the 50. They're not crossing over each other. And Bitcoin has been holding above the 20-day EMA perfectly since this uptrend began. Hasn't even touched the 50. And in fact, take a look here. I want to call your attention to this section right here, which was back in last month in November. When we ran up here on November 9th, we got a big move up to almost 38,000. That's, by the way, where we sold the first half of our Bitcoin position for a 33% gain. We had bought the Bitcoin the day after it broke out on this pullback here. We sent a notice to our members with a trade alert. And then we got a several-week consolidation period here after we sold the first half of our position. And when a trend is really strong, you often don't get much of a pullback. Instead of a pullback, which is a correction by price, we often get a correction by time, where the price just moves sideways, which allows the moving averages to rise up and provide support. And notice that's exactly what happened here with this blue line. We got kind of pretty far away from the 20-day EMA, but instead of the price pulling back to test it, the price just went sideways until eventually the 20-day EMA rose up and touched the price. And notice how it only touched it one day, and buyers stepped in the next day, and we rallied again. And then a week later, we sold off to test the 20, but buyers were waiting, and again, we reversed back up. And again, one more time, right here, we tested the 20 and immediately rallied the next day. Notice a trend. There's buyers on the pullbacks, and that's a really key sign, because in a market that's not healthy, you'll get these pullbacks and the price will just slice right through those pullbacks. But in a healthy market, savvy technical traders use these key levels like we do to look for potential buy points with lower risk. So there was traders waiting to buy these pullbacks to the 20-day EMA, and that's why we had only what we call an undercut scenario. An undercut is when the price of an asset dips below an obvious level of support very quickly, very briefly, and then snaps back above it. So you can see here, like this day right here, we dip below the 20-day EMA by only a few percent, and then the next day we immediately snap back above it. And guess what? It just happened again today. Notice that today we actually had a big drop. After consolidating for a week at the highs, we suddenly got a drop where Bitcoin dropped 7% in the course of only about an hour, a huge sell-off, but it was really just a shakeout, a stop run, whatever you want to call it, because the buyers were definitely standing by, right? As soon as we got down to the 20-day EMA, the price dipped below it by just a few points, and then the buyers immediately stepped in and the price reversed back up. So now we're well above this 20-day EMA after an earlier correction today where we tested that support level. Now the price is still below the 8-day EMA, but that's okay because we're well off the lows of the intraday. Now, I do want to point out the volume surged higher today. So this could be positive or negative depending on where the price closes today. Volume surges are key because they indicate potential changes in trends such as accumulation or distribution among institutions. And in this case, what I see is that we had a heavy volume. If we zoom into the hourly chart, for example, which you can see most of that volume occurred on the sell-off. It was a big volume sell-off. But now, if we go back to the daily chart, if we close near the highs of the day, we're going to form something known as a hammer candlestick pattern, which is a bullish reversal pattern. And if we close near the highs of the day, let's say above this 8-day EMA and near the highs of this range, then that volume spike is bullish, okay, because it means that we ran all the stops, absorbed overhead supply, and we may not see much of a pullback if that scenario happens. Okay, so if that scenario happens and we close near the highs of the day, then we've already had our pullback, and it wouldn't surprise us to see Bitcoin continue to new swing highs pretty quickly. On the other hand, if Bitcoin closes, let's say, in the lower third or the lower half of today's range, then the correction could become a little more prolonged, a little bit longer, because then we could see another test of this 20-day EMA. And really today's low, which is right around 40,600, is really a pivotal short-term level to keep an eye on, right around 40,650 to be exact. Because if we hold above today's low, that means we're going to hold above the 20-day EMA. And as you can see over the past 2 months, that's been a very pivotal level. So if we hold above today's low and close near the highs, then we're going to be looking to start buying sooner rather than later. But if we close near the lows, especially if we violate the 20-day EMA, then the correction could get a little more prolonged, and we could see a pullback to the 50-day MA, the first touch of that, which is rising to converge with support of this prior range. These prior highs for this multi-week consolidation range that formerly acted as resistance, and that'll now act as support if we get a pullback. That should act as support. Remember, by the way, everything we talk about in our videos is not financial advice. This is just our interpretation of what we see on the charts and what the charts say. Now, we've recently closed out the rest of our Bitcoin position that we bought back on October 17th. We sold the rest last week into strength. We've made an average gain of 40% on that trade, and now we're looking for a potential re-entry point with a lower risk buy point in Bitcoin. So we'll be keeping an eye on the price action here in the coming days. Again, very closely watching what happens today. And if we do spot a relatively low risk re-entry point in Bitcoin, then we'll send a trade alert to members of the MTG crypto tribe with our exact entry and stop prices. So now let's go ahead and take a look at Ethereum as a benchmark proxy for the overall health of the altcoin market. The chart is similar to Bitcoin, but there's a few differences. Like Bitcoin, we did see a sharp sell-off today where we undercut the 20-day EMA and currently right in the middle of that range. So that's very similar to Bitcoin. And we've also got, just like Bitcoin, we've got a prior base of support, which was this prior consolidation here. So if we get a pullback to that level, notice how today's low, the low of today, basically came into support of that prior breakout level. So you see that there's a convergence there. And we also have this, which is an uptrend line that has formed off the lows of the October breakout. So we've got 1, 2, three, this is 4 anchor points now that we've got forming an uptrend line. So today's low was a convergence of support from this uptrend line as well as the highs of the prior breakout level. And if we zoom out a bit to the longer term weekly chart, you can see here, notice going back to April of this year, there was the prior highs right around 2130 was also the highs of this prior breakout that we had just a few weeks ago. So that 2130 level is very important, not only short term, but even going back to April, there was support there. So that's a good sign that we held that level, and the buyers definitely stepped in very quickly and reversed that price higher. And now we're back up above 2200. So just like with Bitcoin, you want to keep a close eye on today's low of 2145 in Ethereum. Again, if we close near the highs of today, especially back above the 8-day EMA, then we could say that today's volume, by the way, is not quite as heavy as the selling we saw in Bitcoin. We would say that today's price action would be positive. But if we close near the lows of the day, then we could see some chopping around and some volatility here and a bit longer of a correction. So again, watch where we close today. That's going to be key. But there is a significant amount of support, both this uptrend line and horizontal price support from not only November, but going back to April. So got a lot of support, although we could still see a bit of chopping around if we don't close near the highs in Ethereum. So now let's get to the good stuff. Let's dive in to see the top relative strength altcoins that are on our radar for a potential pullback entry in the coming days. We love pullbacks because as swing traders, we look to sell into strength, take profits, then we wait for the pullback of the top relative strength cryptos. We wait for precision entry points, sell into strength near the highs, and do it all again. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. That's our trading strategy. So we just recently exited our winning positions, our altcoins that we had into strength, and now the portfolio is 100% cash, and we're looking for new trade entries based upon pullback setups that we spot. So let's go ahead and show you what's on our radar screen right now for a potential pullback entry in the coming days and weeks. On the right side of our screen is our high relative strength watch list. This is our hand curated list that we update every week of the top relative strength altcoins in the market. There's more than 10,000 altcoins out there, but we filter this list down to less than 100 that show top relative strength based upon not only their daily charts, but also their weekly charts. We're looking for cryptos that are in a steady uptrend and trending steadily higher above their 8-week moving averages, their 20-week and their 50-week moving averages. Those are the strongest of the strong. And that's what we're looking for. And from that list, we then filter it down even further to look for specific trade setups by using the daily charts. So we use the weekly charts to scan, and then we use the daily charts to look for the individual trade setups. So we've already done a lot of the heavy lifting here for you. And in the Morpheus Crypto chat room, we continually share the updated link to our relative strength watch list so that our members can also follow along. But I'm going to go ahead and share with you the top relative strength cryptos that are on our radar right now for potential pullback entry. First up is Avalanche AVAX. And AVAX was a former leader in the 2021 bull market. And we can see here that AVAX started to get a lot of volume back in mid-November. Notice this big volume surge, which indicates that there's a lot of buying interest. And that's key because volume is one of the most reliable indicators we use. And volume is one of the few indicators that never lies. So we're always looking for not only cryptos breaking out, but breaking out on big volume. If there's a big price breakout, but the volume does not surge higher, then we're typically not interested. So volume is key. So we saw back in mid-November the big volume when AVAX broke out. AVAX then consolidated for several weeks in a tight sideways range, and then on December 6th broke out to a new swing high above that range. And again, volume started to surge higher. So momentum is really picking up and building here in AVAX. Despite Ethereum being down this morning, AVAX also did dip lower, but is still back to near its high. So not only on the weekly chart, but on the daily chart, it's showing high relative strength as well. But again, we don't chase. It's important to understand we don't chase entry points. If we miss a breakout, we wait for the first pullback. We don't like the risk of chasing runaway breakouts. So in this case with AVAX, We are looking for a potential pullback that would undercut the 8-day EMA, kind of like we had back here. Notice how we had the price dipped all the way down, undercut the 8, reversed back above it. So we'd be looking for at least a retracement that tests, around the $30 level. Ideally, though, we'd be looking for a test of the 20-day EMA, the rising 20-day EMA, which could provide an even lower risk entry point. Now, there's nothing to say that such a pullback will happen. I mean, if the price action is strong, we could simply go sideways and correct by time. Remember, I mentioned earlier in this video that there's correction by price, which is a pullback, and then there's correction by time, which is when the price just moves in a tight sideways range and allows the moving averages to rise up and meet the price. Either way, the price eventually touches the moving average. But when I say pullback, that also includes consolidation periods, right? So with AVAX, we're looking for either a pullback to these moving averages or a consolidation period that enables the 20-day EMA to rise up and meet the price. In the case of a consolidation, we'd be looking at probably several weeks of consolidation, just like we had here. But if we get a pullback, then if we get a pullback and a reversal candle, such as a bullish hammer, then we would look for a potential entry point in AVAX. So AVAX, definitely on our radar for one of the top relative strength plays right now. Next up is Injective INJ. Notice that INJ broke out to a new swing high today, despite Ethereum being in pullback mode. So that's a clear sign of relative strength when you've got an altcoin at a new swing high, while the benchmark Ethereum is actually on a pullback. That's a great sign. And not only that, it's also a relative strength leader on the weekly chart. So let's take a look. In fact, if we zoom out to the weekly chart, we notice that INJ recently broke out from a nice base of consolidation here that was going on for several months and broke out above that. And then it formed another shorter term consolidation here, which was a bit choppy, about 4 weeks of chop there. You can see by the long wicks, and now broke out again. So it's forming a base breakout, and that's what you want to see when you've got a steady uptrend. So going back to the daily chart now, we see that INJ's breakout today was confirmed by higher volume. The volume's already above average, and we're still early in the day, so that's a good sign. And we had several dips below the 20-day EMA, but basically held it, other than some undercuts. Notice how intraday we dipped below it, but snapped back above it each time, and even almost came into the 50-day EMA. So INJ doesn't trend quite as steadily as some other cryptos. It's a bit choppier, so it needs a bit wider stop and lower position size to account for it. But if you zoom out past the daily chart to look at the weekly chart, you can see it is in a very steady uptrend. So INJ, we're keeping an eye on. Ideally, we'd like to see maybe a bull flag pattern form here, a short-term consolidation, or even just another dip back down to this to test this 8-day EMA. So INJ is on our radar. Next up is IMX. IMX is also formed a new swing high today, while Ethereum's on a pullback, so showing great relative strength, holding above its 8-day EMA. In fact, it didn't even undercut its 20-day EMA since the breakout began. The relative strength is increasing, the momentum's increasing. And if we look at the weekly chart, IMX is actually working on its 9th week in a row of gains. And this will be week 9 if we close higher again. And we just broke out above this horizontal price resistance from the highs of March as well. So IMX definitely on our radar with its increasing relative strength and volume. SNX Synthetics is another one that is on our radar right now. Again, not only on the weekly chart, it has relative strength. You can see steadily higher on the weekly chart, but on the daily chart as well, it's been holding the 20-day EMA the whole way up, holding the 8-day most every day, and only a couple touches of the 20. Again, big volume the past 2 days, and again, breaking out to a new swing high while Ethereum is on a pullback. Next up is EGLD, which is showing great relative strength, just broke out over the past week. Broke out from a pennant pattern, actually. We had a bull pennant that had formed on the daily chart, which was a nice tight consolidation. And we were tracking that bull pennant pattern, and it just broke out. And now we're looking for a potential pullback entry. The first test of the 8-day EMA around 56, and even all the way down to about the 53 to 54 area, potential test of the prior breakout level. So keeping an eye on EGLD for a potential buy point. Next up is TRB. TRB, for those of you who've been trading crypto for a while, you may know that this was actually a massive leader for several months ago. In fact, starting in August, from August to November, 1,400% gain. It was a pretty insane gain that we had there. And that was all before Bitcoin and Ethereum were rallying. So that major relative strength, but then it got a bit out of sync with the market when Bitcoin and Ethereum broke out and started rallying. Then TRB entered into correction mode. But now, this is the weekly chart. Let's go back to the daily chart. We can see it looks like the correction may be finished. After rallying all the way to $140, we had a very, very sudden, very sharp correction from 140 down to about $80 within a week. And then it chopped around. Our initial attempt to buy TRB was a little bit too early. We stopped out when this breakout failed. We lost just a small loss, like 4%. And now, though, it's looking like it's time to get back in TRB because the price action has reversed and it's going back up above the 50-day moving average. That's key. Notice how this 50-day moving average formerly acted as support, then it broke it. Now it becomes resistance, but now we're back above this resistance. So really key that we're above a 50-day MA, although we still have the 8 and the 20-day MAs below the 50. It's a good sign that we're back above all three moving averages. Also, volume is picking up. Volume's getting stronger. And we broke out above a key level of horizontal price resistance, which was the prior swing high that failed from November 23rd. We're back above that around the $99 level. So with TRB, we're looking for a potential buy entry on a pullback to the $100 area. This prior breakout level could present a relatively low risk buy point, especially given prior momentum that this crypto has shown. So we'll be keeping a close eye on TRB, and we'll set a trade alert if we re-enter TRB. And last on our list is Solana, SOL. And SOL has just been in a steady uptrend since mid-October, been holding perfectly support of its 20-day EMA as well as the 8. In fact, the chart looks very similar to Bitcoin, except SOL is still above its 8-day EMA after today's pullback. And notice that the pullback was on lighter volume relatively than many other altcoins. We're still below average volume for the day, although it did tick higher. Now, SOL is going to find some support, well, right at its 8-day EMA, but also its rising 20, right around 63. So if we get a dip down to that level, we'll look for a bullish reversal candle, which could present us with a relatively low-risk reentry point. We've actually been trading Solana several times over the past 2 months, I believe 5 times to be exact, and we've scored a lot of gains, over 100% worth of gains from swing trading this because it trends so steadily. And we're out now, but we are looking for a potential reentry point. We'd ideally love to see an undercut of the 20-day EMA that reverses. That would present us with a relatively low-risk entry point, but that's just one potential scenario. Anything's possible. We're fully prepared, by the way, for the scenario where we mentioned if Bitcoin closes the day near the high of the day and continues to a new swing high, then that could be it that we get for the pullback for now, because we've already run the stops, and it's not how long the pullback lasts. It's really like how extensive in terms of a percentage dip that we got, and we already got a pretty big percentage dip. So if we close near the highs, then we'll be looking and prepared to jump back in the market, even without much more of a pullback. But we're watching closely because this is a very pivotal market level. So keep an eye on those cryptos that we talked about: AVAX, INJ, IMX, SNX, EGLD, TRB, and SOL. And those are the cryptos on our watch list right now for potential pullback entry in the coming days. If we spot an ideal buy point in any of those cryptos, we will send a trade alert to members of the MTG Crypto Tribe with our exact entry and exit points and our plan for how we're going to manage it. If you're not yet a member of MTG Crypto, head on over to morpheustrading.com and be sure to drop your email on the homepage to get started with receiving our regular updates on the crypto market. And if you want to receive our exact entry and exit prices, go ahead and sign up for MTG Crypto Service. And you can see that by clicking on Crypto Picks on our website. We hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to trade what you see, not what you think. And we'll see you back here in the next one.